Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and this past week was filled with news about the upcoming Apple event, what to expect at the event, as well as updates to iPhone 14, the iOS 15.4 Beta 3 update released this past week. We'll talk about when to expect the next update and much more. This is your news update for the week of February 20th, 2022. And the first thing is, Apple has now made the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus obsolete, meaning that they no longer recognize it for support and won't be updating it any further. However, the recent updates with this particular version may still get security updates, but they technically don't see it as something that they support any longer. Along with this, they also obsoleted the 4th generation iPad, which was the first one to come out with a Lightning connector. So if you want something that's going to get the latest security updates guaranteed, you may want to get maybe an iPhone 7 or newer, as iPhone 6s and 6s Plus are expected to lose support with iOS 16, although we don't know that and we'll have to wait to see if they do that. Apple also updated its support app to now show updated prices for different areas if you have that available. So if you go into the support app, it's free to download. You can see repairs and physical damage. Tap on that for the device you're using, and maybe you cracked your display. Here it will find your best option and then tell you what it would cost if you don't have Apple Care. If you do have Apple Care, it will take that into account and give you the price based on that. So if we go back to repairs and physical damage, maybe the back is destroyed, it's $269. At that price, you may want to just wait and buy a new one, but it just depends on the device, and it will show you based on the device and based on authorized locations near you. One of Apple's display manufacturer partners, BOE, is apparently unable to keep up with demand of the displays due to a chipset shortage. It's expected to impact display production for the next 2 months or so. However, Apple does have many suppliers, such as Samsung and LG, that may be able to pick up the slack, and it may not impact iPhone production at all, as last week Foxconn said supply constraints had been easing. So Apple does have many different suppliers, so hopefully we don't see an impact, but it does look like many things are getting better with the exception of this display manufacturer. Now, if you're someone that uses WhatsApp, they've updated the app this past week to allow you to listen to voice recordings while at the same time going into a different chat. This is something that's super helpful if you use that app and maybe you want to do multiple things at once. So that's something they've updated. You do have to be on version 22.4.75 in order to have that feature, though. The Washington Post reports that Apple may be looking to unionize at some retail locations. So you'll see it says some U.S. Apple Store employees are working to unionize, part of a growing worker backlash. The reason is rising inflation, and Apple is not keeping up with pay as much as the employees would like. Apple did recently improve benefits for many, so this may or may not be something people are doing, and I'd like to know what you think about this in the comments below. Google this week has said that they're working on a privacy sandbox to limit ad tracking on Android, and has said that Apple's blunt approach is ineffective. However, it does seem that it's effective since Facebook recently said it would lose billions in ad revenue because of this. So it seems Google is trying to fit somewhere in between to serve both consumer and companies selling ads. So we could see something similar to privacy tracking limitations on Android in the future. If you use Apple Music and you tap on Listen Now and scroll down, you'll see the new Replay 2022 list. This is something Apple updates all the time, every week, with your most listened to songs. You can see some of mine here. It's mixed with what my wife listens to also, but Skillet, NF, Mute Math, and much more. So that's been updated. This past week, the New York Attorney General issued an AirTag consumer alert over stalking concerns. However, last week, Apple also announced that they would be updating Find My and AirTags in different ways when there's an AirTag nearby that doesn't belong to you to help you better be alerted of that. So these updates are expected with iOS 15.4, and you can see this here from February 10th, where it says an update on AirTag and unwanted tracking. They're going to be making this louder so that you'll hear it a little bit better, and also they've been working with law enforcement and also have advancements coming to AirTag and the Find My network. So there's much more in here, refining unwanted tracking alert logic, tuning AirTag sound, and much more. So this is something Apple has already responded to. Seems like New York was a little bit late with that, but either way, Apple's heard many people's concerns and are working to fix that and make that much better. Apple did update macOS Big Sur this past week as well with macOS 11.6.4. So if you're using a Mac with an older version, that has been updated. And then Along with that, they updated a ton of different iOS updates. So iOS 15.4 Beta 3, iPadOS 15.4 Beta 3, tvOS 15.4 Beta 3, watchOS 8.5 Beta 3, and macOS 12.3 Beta 3. So we had all of those updates, and we're waiting to see when Apple's going to release the next one. However, this past week, Apple stopped signing iOS 15.3, which means they're getting ready for a new version. Typically, when that happens, within a couple weeks, we see some sort of update. Now, because I think iOS 15.4 is probably a few weeks out, it's possible we'll see an iOS 15.3.2, or maybe we'll have nothing in between then. So at this point, it's possible we could see something this week, but if not, I would expect Beta 4 as soon as tomorrow or Wednesday, with maybe a release candidate in the first week of March, with a final release around the 8th of March, when we expect that new Apple event. So it looks like we're going to see something along those lines as far as the release. Apple has not said specifically, but if we see an update such as iOS 15.3.2 at this point, that wouldn't surprise me at all since they stopped signing it. Again, this can change at any time, so Apple has not said anything specifically, but it seems like we're on a weekly release schedule as far as 15.4, and it's possible they even release the RC this week instead of Beta 4. So we'll have to wait and see. We should know as soon as tomorrow. Now, as far as the next iPhone 14, we have a general idea of what it may look like. Foxconn, who assembles the iPhone, is apparently starting trial productions of the iPhone 14. So Apple sort of finalizes the overall design, and then they begin manufacturing it and figuring out the best way to get the production line ready to make sure the process is in place to produce it in Apple's quality standards and the quantity that they need. So that's something that it looks like they're already ramping that up, and then they start mass production in a few months to get everything ready for the fall, where we'll have maybe around September, we'll have the announcement and then the final release of iPhone 14 with millions of them available to the public. That's typically what Apple does. Also, iPhone 14 is now expected to contain 8 gigabytes of RAM, according to a Korean blog called Naver, who has some knowledge of supply chain sources. This could be used for the rumored 8K video with a higher megapixel count, where you need that for 8K, or just used maybe for LiDAR, as maybe if you've used one of those apps that helps you 3D scan a room or something else, you often run out of RAM for each room, so you could use that additional RAM for something like that. iOS, I don't expect really needs that, but maybe they're getting ready for some new features with iOS 16 as well. Apple is also still investigating the possibility of a folding iPhone. However, with recent information from Ross Young, it seems Apple may not release them until at least 2025, but they are looking into maybe a foldable MacBook as well. So they have a few different ideas. They're always exploring things like that. And also today, Apple has completed its production tests for Apple's upcoming AR and VR headsets, according to DigiTimes. So maybe we'll see something like that around WWDC in June, when we expect to see some new products, as well as iOS 16 and the next version of macOS and more. So it looks like Apple's getting a lot ready, with Reality OS and much more expected around WWDC, where we typically get invites for those events in March, and then we'll have the event in June, the first or second week of June. So I can't wait for that, and of course with the new version of iOS with a ton of features and more. Now, like I said earlier, that Apple event is expected on March 8th. That means we should see invites as soon as either this week or next, with that event coming out on the 8th, and we should see new products along with that. So as soon as I know about that invite, once we hear about that, of course, I'll be sure to let you know, and I let you know on many different social media platforms at the same time. Now, Mark Gurman this week has reiterated that he expects not only iPad Air 5th generation, as I've talked about before, with maybe an updated CPU, maybe center stage for the front camera, an upgraded front camera, but also an iPhone SE3. So again, I've said that I think it will be a little bit different since they're going to implement 5G. Now, within the iPhone SE3, I know a lot of people are saying it's going to look just like the SE2, but I would expect something a little different, as we need bigger batteries to handle the additional power drain from 5G. So we'll have to see what Apple's going to do with it, but maybe they'll have something new. I would love to see Touch ID on the power button, but many people basically say it's the exact same as what we have here with the SE2, just upgraded internals. But we'll need something as far as a millimeter wave antenna if they plan to implement 5G with it. So there will be slight changes, and of course, as soon as I know more about that, I'll share that with you. Now, Mark Gurman this week also talked about the MacBook Pro and Mac Mini. And with the upcoming MacBook Pro, much is not expected to change. The expected design is basically going to be the same. We'll have our Thunderbolt ports, and some are saying that we're going to have a touch bar while others are not. So on this MacBook M1, you'll see it's a MacBook Pro with M1. We have the touch bar. Some people have said it's going away. Apple has gotten rid of it on the Pros, so it makes sense to get rid of it here. It's an additional expense. They could just replace it with function keys, of course, and leave Touch ID and things alone. But we'll have to wait and see if they actually change this or not, as there's some reports saying that they're going to keep it, others saying that they won't. I think it would save them money if they don't keep it, and it looks like they're getting rid of it anyway, so it makes sense. But we'll have to wait and see if they do that. But we do expect an M2 chipset, so an M2 but a very similar design. The Mac Mini is also expected to get an update. Whether or not that's the Pro version that we expect with an M1 Pro or M1 Max option, I would love to see that, but we don't really know until they actually release it. It seems to be very little news about that. Of course, we're also expecting that new updated MacBook Air with different colors and more with an M2 in it. So all of those things are expected at this upcoming event. I've talked about them before, but we are expecting an M2. Whether or not it has MagSafe or maybe mini LED, though, seems to be unlikely. However, we'll have to wait and see what they do with that. As far as a new Apple display, many people do expect an updated version of a Pro Display XDR, maybe with ProMotion, but also a less expensive version, as that starts at $5,000. So we expect something less expensive and maybe around the June timeframe, around WWDC, since that's for developers. So we still haven't seen that. We haven't seen an iMac Pro, which again, we expect sometime around in June, maybe with a release a little bit later or maybe later in the summer, along with that iMac Pro and Mac Pro. So those are the things we haven't seen with an updated Apple Silicon chip in it. So I would expect those at least by that time frame, since that will mark about 2 years since Apple's shown it off and would match the time frame of updating all of their products. So again, I'm looking forward probably more to WWDC than the March event, but I can't wait for an event this year just to get the year started with Apple products and more. Again, expect iOS 15.4 Beta 4 or RC this week. And of course, as soon as I know when they're out, I'll let you know with an updated video and more. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, of course, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.